She's a recipient of the Jonah Mitchell Foundation grant. She has shown several domestic and international museums and galleries, and recently participated in the Irish Film Board grant for a project with the Werner Herzog Road Film School. She is represented by De La Day Gallery in Paris, Susan Inglet in New York, Tally Dunn Gallery in Dallas, and Western Exhibitions in Chicago. So, could you please greet
Thank you. All right, thank you guys, and thank you, Brian, for having me out. I'm excited to be here, and I'm fascinated with your campus already, so someone can take me on a walk tonight. I love it. And am I loud enough? Yeah, back there? Nod? Okay, cool. Okay, this is me saying hi. And just to kind of set the scene for you, I'm going to start with work when I was in grad school. So right after undergraduate school, I went to graduate school for art. I came in making really loud, almost hallucinatory, I can't say the word. Thank you. God. Big, loud, kind of aggravating paintings, all abstract. And even though I got into school with that, it wasn't going so well in that first semester for whatever reason. And I was also not comfortable in the environment I was in. I'm just naturally not comfortable, no offense, because we got a lot of artists in the house here. When I'm around only artists, I sort of lose my mind. I'm not comfortable like that. And so I started to miss what I called like normal guys, my dad and his friends. I'm from Nebraska, I'm from the Midwest, and I began to really think about, this is not my dad, although we look really, I didn't mean to dress like him today. I'm not trying to, so John Goodman in Roseanne, his character Dan Connor, if you know it, is similar to the kind of guy I was thinking about. And I don't really exactly know why the hell I became so obsessed with this, but even though I was in Chicago, I wasn't finding that sort of influence. Being kind of isolated only with art people just wasn't cutting it for me. And so I started to, for a lot of different reasons. One, I don't know, a lot of artists have this experience, but in my studio, the studio visits I would have, here I had these large installations, big paintings on cloth that were the size of this map. And then in the corner, stuff to the side, I would always have tiny little drawings that were much more delicate, I thought more boring, and one professor pulled me aside and she said, "You have to stop making these big paintings, they're terrible. What's good are these things that you're not paying any attention to and not showing us." And she dared me to put my paintbrush away. She's like, just don't touch it until I say you can touch it again, but start making these drawings. And I did that, and I mean, normally I'm really obstinate, but sometimes I like to be told what to do, and there was something about that that rang true for me right away. So I started to make really small, all 8 by 10 little drawings of these men that I invented that reminded me of my dad and his friends. And they were just doing these calisthenics, they were stretching, they were throwing balls at one another. They were sort of smart-ass drawings in a way. I mean, I think in the program I was in, it was a very theory-based program, and they would, kind of look down upon anyone who actually was a maker, and they would say that like, "Well, you're a maker, so I don't really know how to approach you." And I learned a lot from that, and I'm very grateful, but at the time it was a little confusing. All of these were all done with a mechanical pencil, which I ended up using the same mechanical pencil for, I still use it, but for about 13 years I used this one mechanical pencil. At a certain point I realized if I multiplied these characters that I was making, and they were all guys, they were all men, they were all kind of overweight, middle-aged guys, if I multiplied them by the hundreds, I could use those characters as my archetype for humanity. And I had this notion, I could draw these guys until the day I die and never be kind of blank on any ideas that I could show about human emotion through these characters. At this time, you can see they were kind of like, you can see I'm starting to infuse my opinions about humans on these, where there are bombs being dropped, there's a dead guy behind that one tree, and these guys are just running around, they're skiing in the background, they're not noticing anything around them. So that's something that's a continuing theme throughout all of these. And then I left graduate school early. That's a whole other story, but I decided after a year I needed to move on, which was a really difficult decision because I always loved being a student and I was doing well. I had all A's. I had a scholarship for the whole thing, but something told me I needed to leave, and I left, and shortly after I was granted this opportunity in Texas to have a residency. And they showed me the room, and it was like double the size of this room we're in that I would get to work in, and I'm like, okay, what do? I make these tiny drawings. This is going to be really a waste of space. And so I decided to scale up and make a big one. So, and instead of deciding to, okay, the men are all just this big, tiny little guys, the figures I drew, you would think I would then make those figures bigger, but for whatever reason it didn't occur to me, and instead I just kept them the same size and just expanded their landscape into a bigger territory. So this was my first huge drawing. This is, I don't know, about 14 feet long by 7 feet tall, and it's called "Everything that stands will be at odds with its neighbor, and everything that falls will perish without grace." This piece was loosely based on Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. In my center panel here, you can see there's a big dead uprooted tree. There's a lot of dead birds and owls around it, and in a counterclockwise circle, all of my men are continuously circling the death in the center. Whereas in Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, he actually gave them much more fun, because in their center panel, they're also going in a counterclockwise circle, but surrounding a little swimming hole where all of these people are indulging in all sorts of fun, sinful activities. I had removed a lot of elements of fun from these drawings at this point. The guys are still a little goofy looking, but and then it became apparent really early on that death was going to be a continuing theme too, especially with the animal life and nature. The guys survived for a lot longer, and I drew the animals very differently, mannered entirely different. They were drawn, as you can see, kind of beautifully, naturalistically, whereas the human figures are very awkward and clunky and not at all pretty. So this is me just constantly saying, hey, we don't get something that these natural beings do. Humans seem to be like bumbling around to me, and the animals don't. So this is the next big piece that was based on, well, I guess I was thinking about altarpiece paintings from the pre-Renaissance and Renaissance. So, you'd have your altar underneath where that buffalo is. And this is called "As ye the sinister creep and feign, those once held become those now slain." And this piece is structured in a very weird way where the entire, in a diagonal. So one diagonal is full of people doing just god-awful things to one another. And then the other one, everyone's being really sweet to one another, giving each other presents, hugging each other, kissing each other, holding hands. And then in the center, you have this beautiful American buffalo standing in this bittersweet stance on top of this cliff. But if you look, he's up there, very godlike, but there's really no way for him to get down off of a cliff that big. So this also, I was starting to, I never thought I was drawing realistically, but at this point I realized I was doing kind of subtle, odd things that I didn't even realize because these take so long with a mechanical pencil. So this buffalo fur is completely my cat, who's gone now, but the cat was always next to me. This is completely Maine Coon fur, not buffalo fur. What else? I don't have, well, here's another close-up of that. So you might also notice, I never said this, they're all wearing the same sweatshirt and sweatpants. That just seemed easy, and it seemed like it would look good when I multiplied them. Early on, they always were wearing those. And then I started to realize this is looking really cultish, especially when they're just kind of they're often in a trance, just standing there like weirdos. And then I remembered when I was in high school, maybe around high school, the Heaven's Gate cult, if you know anything about them, they came out, and all of my guys had Nike tennis shoes all along too. But anyway, the Heaven's Gate cult people were obviously the prototype for my guys, and I had no idea. If you guys don't know, there was a group of people living in a mansion, and they all wore these sweats. Then they committed mass suicide, and they had those outfits on. So apparently it made its impact in me slowly but surely. Another big one, this one is me kind of, I don't really know why I wanted to do this, but this one's everyone's being positive here. So everyone's in an embrace, including the trees in the upper portion are also in an embrace. So everything's kind of coming together and going upwards into like a heaven-like space up there. And I haven't said it outright, but obviously I'm a narrative artist. I make narrative-based work. And so I was taught in my undergraduate program by an amazing artist called Lee Baxter Davis. If you're interested, look him up. And he would talk to us about narrative work being labyrinthine, where you think you have kind of a plan if a lot of your work kind of comes from it's under the same umbrella. Mine is obviously this apocalyptic tale about these men, just to put it simply. And you think you know where you're headed, but then the work, if you're really invested in it, will take you on turns that you never really imagined. So, you make a left turn suddenly. And so this one was me purposely trying to birth some other storyline in the future where these two men found this cliff and then they were going to somehow multiply in this kind of fantastical way and start this whole new lifestyle. I was also leaving out all acts of sexuality from my work, and I wanted to include that with these two particular guys, and I still haven't done that, but I never know, because I tend to like rule things out and say, oh, I'm never going to do that. And right now I'm in this mode, I'm never going to draw these guys again, and I haven't for a while, but I shouldn't say that because there's no telling. This piece is based on, in maybe like 1800 in the south of France, there was another cult. They were called Magonia, and they claimed that they were circumnavigating the clouds in these kind of spaceship type things, and they were doing like awful things on Earth though, and so they claimed that they fell from the clouds. So if you look closely, that's what those little things are. These are these little figures falling from this other Earth above. This is another big one, about 14 feet long by 8 feet tall. Again, even those big skies are all with one, you guys know, 0.5 mechanical pencil, one of the tiniest you can get. So these large ones at this point, usually took about 8 or 9 months to make just one drawing. My grandmother was really dear to my heart, and she's the reason I'm an artist, and she taught me to paint with oils when I was a little kid. We did like Bob Ross style, if you know what he is. Just like looked at magazines and copied the landscapes. So my grandmother died, and I kind of mentioned I had this reoccurring theme where these 5 dead owls were kind of hidden almost Where's Waldo style in all of the big drawings. And the 5 owls represented the 5 people I feared dying in my life, my family members. And my grandmother was one of them. And when she died, I was devastated. And I always loved in books, in literature, when a book is dedicated to someone. And art doesn't quite feel the same. You don't really have that sense about an ode. Also in music, love songs. And so this was a tribute to my grandmother. It's called, As My Heart Quiets and My Body Dies, Take Me Gently Through Your Troubled Sky. You can see her on the tree trunk, or the dead owl there on that trunk. And then there's a funeral procession marching to the grave there, where the other 5 owls are perched up around the grave site. And I did another big drawing just based on her, with this kind of spirit rising from the dead owl body there. This one's called The Passing. I threw this in. There was a moment where a lot of moments, that I was getting really sick of making these drawings. And I'm like, this needs to end soon. How am I going to close off this story? And I never imagined I'd be feeling that, since I claimed I would make very big statements. I'm prone to do that, hyperbolic person. I thought that would happen when I was in my 70s or 80s maybe, or something. But I just wanted to find ways to leave this. And so, also really quickly, I want you guys to know that I have always worked in a guest bedroom of whatever house I'm living in. I've never had a studio. So some people will tell you have to have some fancy thing, but I've made these enormous drawings in really weird, tiny rooms, carpeted. This one's carpeted. So you can make art anywhere. There's no excuses, in my opinion. So in thinking about how I was going to end this series, I know, well, I wanted to cast these guys off somehow. If you'll also notice, slowly but surely, there were big mountain ranges. The mountain ranges slowly, we're about 10 years into me making these drawings, by the way. They kind of started to dwindle and get lower, and then it was flat. There aren't as many trees. The environment's changing. Everything's getting a lot more harsh and dark. And so this was kind of based on, well, Ship of Fools is a kind of, in medieval times it was said it's all folklore, I think, but they would, anyone they deemed insane, they would send them off into the ocean on decrepit rafts, basically to die. So, being kind as I am, I decided to do that to my guys. So there they go, all on these little rafts. This is the only man-made thing they've ever had out of all of these 10 years of making these. I never gave them a house. I never gave them any mode of transportation. They finally figure out a way to build something, and they built these rafts, and they're all clamoring for survival. Some guys are trying to lead the group. Some guys are dying already. Some guys are pushing the other ones off. And also, you might notice another thing that's happening is I'm starting to be more prone to abstraction within these pieces. So if this sky is basically just bigger versions of how I draw those waves, and then if you turn it this way, that's how I draw the tree trunk images. So I started to realize I was becoming very obsessive about just using the graphite too. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It started to get to be problematic in a lot of ways, but and then after that was done, I decided to take a year to draw this. It was my biggest piece of the time, and really end it. So up there you have the last guy hanging by a fraying thread over this monstrous, almost cartoonish, it looks like it's coming to life, ocean. And this is called These Final Hours Embrace at Last. This is our ending. This is our past. And I wanted an end without a very clear conclusion. So in a way, this guy could be climbing up to heaven, or he could be plummeting into the ocean to die, which, hint, hint, that's what I intended. I wanted him to die. To give you a sense of scale, that was that drawing professor I was just talking about, Lee Baxter Davis. And here's a close-up of that character. It's funny, it's almost like a litmus test for people's outlook on life. When I showed this piece, it was in Dallas, Texas. That's kind of another place I'm from, where I lived for a long time. And this elderly lady came walking up to me, and she had already told my parents she was very worried about me based on the work. And then she told me, she's like, I heard you talking, and I know you said that he's going to die, but I just see him crawling right up to heaven. And so if you want to look at it that way, that's okay, but that's not the way I saw it. That was also loosely, sometimes I directly pull from art history, like this is Winslow Homer's The Lifeline, which I had always loved. And, you know, it's clear that that's coming from someplace to rescue this woman, but I wanted mine to be a little bit unclear, so it was just these strings hanging from the sky. So once that was done, I can't tell you, I was done with the men, I felt good about that, and I wanted to make more mysterious imagery. And I started to think, I'm very influenced by literature, probably more so literature than I am by art for whatever reason. And I started to think of those big drawings as like novels, and these are about 6 feet by 6 feet square, so these would be like chapters of a book. And then my ultimate goal was like, how can I make images that are just as strong with, and they would be like snippets of a poem or something, snippets of a line of poetry or even a word. And so that's what I attempted to do with some of these big kind of unclear images. There's something Luther Vandross said to the comedian Chris Rock, and I love Chris Rock, and he told this story on a podcast I listened to. Luther Vandross said, anybody can make people scream, but can you make them quiet? And not that my early drawings were making anyone scream at all, but you get the gist. They were just much more expressive and clear in that way, and I wanted to confuse people. For me, I love images that are jarring and confounding, and that I don't really know how the hell anyone could have come up with it. And so I became interested in figuring out how I was going to do this. This piece, for instance, is called a disharmony, and people will ask, what is that? Is that a cloud that came down? Is he disappearing? And I kind of still don't know. And I'm completely fine with that for the first time in my life. And I trust this as an image. And you know the difference as an artist or a maker of any kind when you trust something or not. And so sometimes you don't have to have every verbal answer for things. So allowing more mystery. And then I want to show, Brian mentioned it. I'm going to turn the lights out when I show this. I got to go to Ireland and someone wanted to make an animation of, I don't know, am I doing that? Okay, that's good. Werner Herzog is a filmmaker I love. Some of you probably love him too. Whoa. He's here. He's in the building. I'll try it again. Now they're even brighter than ever, right? I know none of us know this classroom, right? Here we go. All right, you guys, let's do it one more time. Anyway, I got to learn from him. I was the only artist in something called Rogue Film School. And I got to learn from Werner Herzog about how he makes his films. And he didn't allow any recording device. It was a very special experience. And I don't even know why I was there, because I didn't want to make any films. I didn't want to make any animation. But this one guy persisted and for 2 years kept bugging me and saying, we got to do something. I want to animate your little guys. And so finally, I don't remember, I just caved. And so this is, I don't want to show the full thing. It's only a 13-minute short film, but here is the trailer for it. Oh, no, that's not the trailer. Get ready. I swear. Here we go. See it. Okay. So does anyone know how to make, no one does, right? Because I don't want this light on, but we don't know what we're doing. I'll try it again. I'm sure it'll come back up. All right, so that happened. And then once that was kind of over, that really felt like, okay, we really got that out. I had to revisit those guys. Something about revisiting all of my little characters, though, like got into my system, got into my blood or something. And I had this brilliant idea that was the worst thing I ever conceived of, which was, let's bring them back, but since they're dead, they're in hell. And this is going to be the craziest drawing ever, and everything's going to be violent, and there's going to be more of them than ever, and it's going to take me so many years, and I'm going to slave over this thing, and it's going to be the best thing I ever did. And I remember I was so excited, I even called my mom, and I told her about it, and she started crying on the phone, and she's like, you're already putting yourself through so much, because I haven't said this to you guys yet, but I was really like not living a life at all, only making drawings, and so, but I thought this was amazing, and I was going to do it. So the one thing I knew there was going to be this tower in the center of these robed figures trying to crawl out of hell. So this was a little prototype to give you an idea. These were bigger. These little robed figures were bigger than they ended up being on the big drawing. They ended up being about a fourth of that size. And this is just a little 12-inch piece to give you an idea, my little sketch. And then here is what the finished piece looked like. So this was definitely the biggest thing I ever made. This is, I think, 18 feet long by, I don't know, 9 or 10 feet tall. And here is the middle panel. So this thing right here, that is, I call it Monk Tower. That thing ended up having over 35,000 of those little those little monks on there. And they were all hand-drawn, and they were all cut out by miniature scissors, and then they were so little that I couldn't glue them on without messing up the whole thing, so I had to put them on with tweezers. This was a dark time in my life, and I would like not even leave my home, like not even to get the mail for like periods of 3 weeks at a time and stuff. It ends up looking like snake skin here. Very different imagery too, like I was a lot more, I thought, free, like I made ghost-like imagery. This is the right panel. All told, the 35,000 little monks are one thing, but all told, the whole piece has over 70,000 miniature figures drawn onto it. You can see sometimes it's like piles, that's how the ferns were made. Sometimes it's like piles of dead bodies. There were decapitated heads. There's one. All sorts of things. It was a massive undertaking. And it definitely drove me crazy. And it ended up, it was a little over 3 years of my life was dedicated only to making this. And it was silly because I also moved from Texas to California at this time, and I picked a house to move into solely based on the fact that it had a wall big enough for me to finish this. I made very bad choices in a lot of different ways. And then I had a show of it at my gallery in New York, so this is the installation, and I thought, okay, well now that I'm showing it, it'll all be worth it. The 20 pounds or whatever I gained by never leaving the house and only drinking caffeine and eating chips or whatever I was eating, that'll be okay, and my mind will be clear, and now I'll start doing yoga or something. I mean, I really was so excited to just be done with it, and I was gonna change. And then, and I kind of, I'll be honest, I really thought people would really dig this drawing. Like I was like, hey, this is gonna get some people interested. I was just way excited. And this is what happened. I don't know why this looks like it's from Tim and Eric or something, but this is all I could find that said no response. No response, not anything. And even in my most like tiny shows throughout my life, like someone would kind of say something to me or tell me, I don't know, I didn't realize I needed like approval, but I really did, and I don't, that's a whole story that we're gonna get into, but no one cared that this show was up at all. And like for what I put into it to have, my dad always says NR. If he talks to someone and they don't say anything, he's like, oh, NR. So I had an NR. And this is what I turned into. That's not me, but this is pretty much what I looked like. I got very, very, very depressed. I mean, if I had problems leaving the house before, you can imagine. I had a crazy obsession with the Golf Channel that developed during this time. I had to watch it 4 days a week. Also I was not making work at all, which ever since I was like, my arm could move, I wanted to make artwork. So it was really bad. I joined a hip hop dance class thinking that the activity would cheer me up or something, and it ended up being the weirdest class you can ever imagine. It did not help. I may or may not have had too many whiskeys around this time. On the positive, I did start an herb garden, which I wanted to do my whole life. This isn't mine. This is someone on the internet, but I did that. And then eventually, I would say it took like 10 months or 11 months. I finally was like, all right, I've got to start, like the impulse came back and I started to make work again. And I didn't know what I was doing at all anymore. And I didn't care. And I was making images based on impulse. And I was really, since I finally gave my arm, my physical self, a rest from making work, I was in a weirder state in my studio, like a much more meditative state, I guess. And so the images that I was coming up with were kind of out of left field, and I really didn't know what they were, and they weren't all that great, to be honest with you, but at least I was working and I was feeling better. So it was like a year after that, and a year after the Hell show didn't go over well. And then Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, all the East Coast, as you know. This was 2 years ago last month. And it was a devastating hurricane. And it really hit Chelsea hard, which some of you know is where all the art galleries are in New York. And well, long story short, 4 years, a little bit more than that, worth of my work was suddenly floating in 6 feet of water, including my hell drawing and many other really meaningful pieces to me. And I didn't know it the day I knew the hurricane had come, but it just never occurred to me that my work was affected, but it was. And this is the same, this is like right down the street from where all my work was in my gallery. This is a pile of artwork. I was certainly not alone. You know, and it was obviously people's lives were lost, so I'm not saying it was anything like that, but it was bad. And so I also couldn't help but to think right away, I mean, the minute I got the phone call, I thought how prophetic it was in a way that I ended my series of drawings with a man being taken up by a tsunami, a hurricane wave, and then my work and what felt like my life was kind of destroyed by a hurricane wave too. So here I am again. Things aren't going so well. But this time around, the depression was a little bit different because it was Mother Nature. It was like a way bigger thing than me or any of us. And I was forced to think about why the hell I would ever have wanted to do any of this in the first place. Why do I want to be an artist? And really consider why for real, like I hadn't in a long time. And I stumbled upon this drawing I made when I was in kindergarten. And this is called Ride in the Night. I spelled night wrong, but I was in kindergarten. And I won my first art contest with this. And I also saw this, and I was like, well, okay, I was always a kid. This is why. Because I was always a kid who just wanted to make drawings. All of my fondest memories are of me being indoors with no one else around and peacefully doing this kind of stuff. And so, and also, I'll be damned if this doesn't look exactly like a lot of my work now. You'll see. So I guess I was very influenced by it. But so I suddenly had freedom. There was something about that all being taken away from me and me being really tested. And I then put myself in check a little bit, and I reevaluated what I wanted to do and what kind of work I really wanted to make. And I suddenly had this amazing amount of freedom, and I included color for the first time in my entire life, well, ever since I was in undergraduate school. And I was making these kind of depictions that somehow seemed like a world that had just kind of broken apart or blew up and is now settling, and it's not quite sure of itself, which is exactly how I felt and still do and did not in the past when I thought things were going so well. And you can see these are still maintaining some of the graphite way that I draw with the mechanical pencil, but I was then layering oil pastel on top and rubbing it. And then every once in a while I would make drawings that didn't have any graphite, and that felt like a tremendous accomplishment to me because I was really holding on tight to that graphite for a long, long time. And I had to really wonder why I was holding on to it. And I do love working with it still, but it is, I don't know. I think I got carried away, and I got really attached to it because I think for all sorts of bad reasons. That's what people expected me to draw. When I had a show coming up, I felt like I had to. Anyway, this one's called The Watcher. This is called The Tower. This one, I want to also say, there were never any times when I even my direction of line, the way I draw was so specific and limited that I wouldn't even go up and down. See, like this sky, the direction of line is this way. I was terrified to even do that. Everything I drew had to be done in this certain manner. So this is all very freeing for me. And then there were a couple of art references made about my work, but I always liked so many more artists that didn't kind of make themselves clear in my work, and that always kind of made me sad. And not that I wanted to be derivative of those people, but like I grew up, I even in high school thought I saw Van Gogh sitting on my bed as a ghost. Like I was obsessed with him when I was little. And then I love Rothko, and I love Cy Twombly, and I love George Tooker. So this is a piece which was an ode to George Tooker. This is George Tooker, if you don't know his work. This is called Lunch. God, I love this stuff. And then I'm getting to the end here of the pieces. This one's called The Unmoored. I wanted these, the ones where I just had a show that was all of these oil pastel and all back to being small, tiny little drawings. And I wanted them to look like a world had just ended simultaneously, a world had ended, and also a new world had just begun. I guess I'm a world maker. These aren't as narrative as they were in the past, but I can't help but to kind of tell stories, even if they're kind of vague, and I've said this word a lot, but unclear. I made a lot of bad stuff in the last 2 years after the hurricane, by the way, like a lot. I had counted up a stack of 300 drawings that are so bad that you can't even believe how bad they are. I should have thrown them in here, taken photos of them. But I did it on purpose. I think I needed to vomit out everything left over from all of those years of kind of me kind of tormenting myself by making this work in a way. And I also want to say that I'm getting to why Louis C.K.'s on here, by the way. I really would, if anyone here could say, hey, Robyn, we're going to go ahead and erase that hurricane from your life and you can have all those drawings back, I would never, ever want to save any of that work because it's been the single best thing that ever happened to me in a lot of ways. So that's how good that was. Okay, I'm going to read to you something Louis C.K. wrote. The only way to learn this stuff is by failing. All this is learned by having bad times. You have to be willing to have a bad time. People who need to feel like a star and like they're succeeding every time will not ever get better. But if you're willing to feel bad, do badly, have a stale, boring version of yourself out in front of everybody, you can find this stuff in the muck that is very useful. And that also reminds me of the famous Samuel Beckett line that is, ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. That's now like basically my mantra in a way. And if no one asked me for any advice, but if I were to give you guys advice, any of you young artists, I would say, don't try to be perfect. Try to continue to be vulnerable, even if you establish yourself, you want to do this. Never pretend to know it all. You've got to be brave and do this, really, I think, for no other reason than because you love it. Because any other reason will like make you a mental case. Trust me. And that's all I have. So thank you guys. And do we have time for questions if anyone has any? Okay. Don't be shy, but no pressure. Yes. It was 2 years ago, a couple of weeks ago, I think. Yeah. So it's been a lot of growth. I'm kind of proud of myself in 2 years. I really don't feel like the same human being. So that's good. This human being isn't that much better than the other one, but a little bit.
Working just mainly with the paints now? Are you trying to go bigger or trying to stay smaller?
You know,
Completely away from that?
I don't know. I tried to go bigger and I didn't like the feel of it yet, and maybe I will, but I am trying to not limit even what I suppose I might do. But yeah, I am working. I mean, every once in a while I'll pick up the mechanical pencil, but normally I'm just using, there are these big graphite chunks you can get, and I'm just wildly attacking pieces of paper and smudging it in with my entire arm, and then putting them aside. And then I do those oil pastels are made, so these are oil pastels, and I like the idea of using oil pastel. I'm going to put this one up. I like the idea of using these because they reminded me of like junior, like I don't think oil pastels are a very sophisticated tool. Like people don't really think like that's a cool thing to use. But I liked them and I liked their quality. And then it took me a while to get the hang of something that made me feel right about them. So then I started to like break them off into these tiny little chunks, and then I'll drop the chunks. And I mean, this is like this big, so this looks terrible. And then I use the back of my nail to push them, so they become, it's almost like they look like impressionist paintings or pointillism up close. It's really hard to tell that. So, and that's when I'm comfortable. It took me like a year and a half until I found that way to use them. I knew that I trusted something about them. And then once I discovered this, of course, obsessive way, I mean, this is a very obsessive way to do it, but it looks very unique and very strange. So I'm very in love with it. I haven't made work in a little while because I'm moving. This is the longest break I've taken since that terrible year in the last like month. So I'll get back to it. Who knows what'll happen. Uh-huh.
Does your income come from the gallery, or you have commissions, or do you just pay for publications, or do you just
My income? Yeah, just I haven't had a day job in quite a while. I get lucky. I mean, it's not easy, and it's like this close every single month, but somehow I make it work, and then right when things aren't working, I'll apply to every grant known to man, and then the grant will carry me through. So, and I do teaching gigs a lot, but not a solid teaching career or anything like that.
Have you thought about picking up your paintbrush at all since your former teacher told you to throw
Yeah, it's been a long time. I did try during those weird times when I was making very ugly artwork. I made some watercolors, and I tried some acrylics, and I don't know what's going on. It's like that woman had put this dare on me, and now I cannot get back into it. So every time I try, I just don't feel right about it. And it might be like I might need to work on paper, because everything I was doing was on panel or canvas, and I'm so used to paper, and it's like it just feels like that tangibility of it with me. I feel very connected to working on paper. So I don't know. So far, it's not happening, though. And she has no idea. I can never find that woman to tell her what she did in a good way. But she has no idea that she created a monster of some sort. Anything else?
Hot drinks or deli meats?
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, right there, black jacket.
Are you a big fan of Tim and Eric?
Oh, yeah, I am a huge fan. Are you?
Yeah.
I know. I have a lot of influence. That's another, now that you asked about Tim and Eric, are you watching bedtime stories?
I'm not caught up right now.
Okay, bueno. Once you watch it, you'll know why I just said bueno. If anyone's a Tim and Eric fan, I'm completely obsessed. And I have a lot of comedy influences, and I always have, even when I was at my darkest. And so a lot of people are very confused why there's not a lot of humor in my work. And in fact, Brian and I talked about that in my studio once, because I kind of make these funny drawings on the side. And I would hope as I continue to get a little bit healthier mentally, maybe some of the influences of comedy will come into play in my work. And I wouldn't mind that now, where I probably would have really said, no way, in the past. So hopefully you'll see some Tim and Eric stuff. Yes?
Do you have a piece that you cherished and carried around with you throughout the years?
There is one, and it's a version of this guy. His name was Runaway Lionel, I called him. And you saw him in the beginning, and I had him in a lot of these. Can you see him? So he's the guy who's got underwear on who's leaving the scene, and he was always like the only smart one who knew to get out of town and And I have a portrait that I drew of him, not really a portrait, but he's like just him floating in space, jumping. And I've had it ever since I made it, which was in 2001. So he's my main guy. That's a good question. And it's good to keep your work around too. I also pull a piece from every show to keep, like my favorite too. So I actually have more than that, but this is the one I actually have on a bathroom wall.
How does your dad feel about you moving away from him and his friends as a subject in your work?
Well, they're sad. My dad's best friend is named Marty, and my dad's name is Jim. And they were both at my show in New York just a couple of months ago. And Marty didn't, my dad had already known, and he's fine because he got sick of me talking about him in this way because I killed him off. And he was like, why, what are you doing? Because he knew that I was like, at first it was this big, like, I love my dad and his friends. And then it got really awful. And so he didn't love that at all. And then, but Marty was always really happy, and he's always like, I want a cut of every drawing that I'm in and all this stuff, just joking. But anyway, so Marty and his wife came to New York for their first time, I think, maybe their first time. And Marty was just like kind of devastated the whole time, realizing that he wasn't in here anymore. So I have to find a way to get Marty back in because he deserves it. Yeah, and my dad's happy though. My dad, I've got to stop drawing my dad. He would be very glad if I dropped him from the conversation altogether. Okay, guys, anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you all. You're a great crowd, and I appreciate it.